Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Impact MENA Hydrogen Session, Collaborate and Act for MENA's Hydrogen Delivery. If this is the first time we are meeting each other, my name is Molly Huang, Content Manager of Leader Associates Impact, and your host of today's session. The event is organized by Leader Associates, which is an international clean energy event organizer covering solar, wind, storage, and hydrogen. We organize high-level in-person conferences and exhibitions in over 10 countries across 5 continents, attracting more than 40,000 industry peers every year. In March 2022, we will also have our physical MENA hydrogen event named Connecting Green Hydrogen MENA in Dubai, dated on March the 29th to the 31st. Serve to accelerate the hydrogen business and partnership formation through face-to-face interactions. The Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure of the UAE as host country will also deliver the opening speech there. The 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐬𝐿 Impact Series, our online brand that complements our ground activities, is a digital intelligence platform that teams up with global energy leaders, administrations, practitioners, and forward thinkers to drive social-wide approach on sustainable transition and to inspire business growth across international borders. And an overview of today's agenda: to reach the carbon neutrality goals in 2050 and some countries in 2060, hydrogen is a hot topic for both the MENA region and the rest of the world. In order to switch to a hydrogen economy, there are many questions to solve and many issues to tackle. In the context, we are more than honored to have this wonderful speaker lineup to help touch on the current market status, challenges, and the next steps forward. Starting with our first presenter, Mr. Wael Moati, gas industry expert of OAPEC, to give an overview of the hydrogen development status in Arabian countries, followed by Mr. Mohamed Ghazali, Secretary General of Ministry of Energy, Mines and Environment of Morocco, to zoom in on the country's policy efforts. The third presenter will be Mr. Rajat Seksaria, who would give us an update on ACME's $3.5 billion hydrogen to ammonia practices in Oman and India. In the fourth presentation, we continue with Mr. 𝗠𝗶𝗶𝘀𝘁, President of 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐿 Desert Energy and also one of the founding members of the MENA Hydrogen Alliance. Last but not least, the capital and the funding support panel contributed by Mr. Cristian, Carraretto, Associate Director, Green Economy and Climate Action of EBRD, and Mr. Suhail, Shatila, Senior Energy Specialist of APICORP, the 2 main multilateral banks in the region that are committed to emission reduction. And I want to remind all of our attendees that each presenter will be given 30 minutes in total, combining 20-minute presentation plus 10-minute interactive Q&A session. Therefore, we really encourage everyone to type your questions in the Q&A box as the webinar progresses. And finally, before I call on our first presenter, allow me to quickly go through our participants today. Among them, we are honored to have participation from the UAE, Morocco, Egypt Energy Ministry, as well as subject matter experts in DEWA, Lebanese Petroleum Administration, as well as a series of R&D institutions across the globe. An increasing investment and financing appetite is also ramping up from global energy majors, including ENGIE, ENI, EDF, Enel, etc., and reputed banks like SMBC, HSBC, KfW, Societe Generale, etc. Apart from players joining on Zoom, the session is also live streamed in WeChat for Chinese viewers. And now, without further ado, I'd like to invite out our first speaker on stage, Mr. Wael Moati, gas industry expert with OAPEC. Wael has 19 years of experience in the gas industry. In 2013, Wael was appointed as gas industry expert at OAPEC where he acts as the Chief Gas Officer responsible for developing and reflecting OAPEC's views and insights on hydrogen, as well as the gas and LNG sector. He is also a member of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe's group of experts in gas. And Wael, it's a great honor to have you here. May you kindly introduce a bit more about yourself, about OAPEC, and fire up the presentation.
Thanks so much, Molly, for your brief introduction. Good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me first to thank Leader Associate for the kind invitation to OAPEC to share some insights about hydrogen development in the Arab countries. Briefly introducing my organization, OAPEC. OAPEC is a regional intergovernmental organization established in 1968 in the state of Kuwait. OAPEC, like any other organization, intergovernmental one, is keen with enhancing cooperation among its members in various forms of the petroleum industry. OAPEC members are 11, and some members of OAPEC are also OPEC members, but as I mentioned, it's only for the Arab countries. Back again to the main theme of my presentation, I will speak on the hydrogen development in the Arab countries to share together what is the current status and what are the challenges we think it will affect the development of the hydrogen economy, and also what are the future steps in order to advance the hydrogen development in the Arab region. I will speak in my presentations on three parts. In the first part, I will speak or provide some key figures and facts about hydrogen. And in the second part, I will speak in more details about challenges and the potential success factor to develop hydrogen economy in the Arab region. And in the last part, I will speak about the current plans to produce and export hydrogen according to the most recent survey we have conducted here in OAPEC. Hydrogen, like any commodity, has what we call a value chain that consists of three main components. The major component of the value chain is the production side, in which hydrogen is produced using the fossil fuel, as we know, like gray hydrogen produced from natural gas or black hydrogen produced from coal. And also we have what we call renewable hydrogen or green hydrogen that can be produced from electrolysis of water and of course using the renewable energy sources. The second part of the hydrogen value chain is the storage and the transportation part of the value chain, in which hydrogen can be, let's say, stored as a compressed gaseous hydrogen at high pressure of about 350 to 700 bars, or can be liquefied to have a liquefied hydrogen, but it requires to liquefy hydrogen and reduce its temperature to minus 253 degrees. And also for transportations, pipelines can be used to transport hydrogen, or can be used, we can use trailers or tankers to transport either compressed hydrogen or liquid hydrogen. The last part of the hydrogen value chain is the end-use applications. And all of us know that hydrogen has a wide range of applications in which it can be used as a fuel in the power generation sector or in the heat generation sector, and also can be used in transportation sector through the use of hydrogen fuel cells, and also in the industrial sector, which is currently the main application or the main use of hydrogen in 2020. Of course, we are speaking about hydrogen. Sometimes we are, as I mentioned, producing it from fossil fuels. So in such case, we understand it will have emissions. But if we are speaking about green hydrogen, which can be produced through electrolysis of water, we don't have emissions in such a case. Just to understand where we are right now in hydrogen market. Hydrogen market today is really huge. In terms of quantity, the total production of hydrogen today, or according to the recent estimate by IEA, with about 90 million tons per annum. However, about 99% of today's hydrogen production comes from the fossil fuel, where natural gas is the main source of the hydrogen production, accounting for over 75% of the total hydrogen production. The second main source of hydrogen production is coal, accounting for about 23-24 percent of the total hydrogen production, and the remaining limited share, if we can say that, is from renewable energy sources, which we call the green hydrogen. However, if we look to the future, and we are speaking today about the role of hydrogen as a key component of the future energy system, there are some, let's say, a positive outlook for the demand on hydrogen. And according to a recent study by the Hydrogen Council, the total demand of hydrogen can reach up to 650 million tons per annum in 2050. What does it mean? It means that the current demand of hydrogen is expected over the next 3 decades to increase about 7 to 8 times by 2050. However, we have to consider also what about the current link between production and consumption of the hydrogen value chain. The bad news is that hydrogen infrastructure is still limited. We are speaking here about 4,500 kilometers of the total lengths of the hydrogen pipelines, which if we compare it with natural gas, we can speak about natural gas about 3 million kilometers. We have still very limited infrastructure for hydrogen. And the second bad news, we can say that, is the hydrogen infrastructure is limited, or let's say geographically concentrated in a number of countries like United States and some European countries like Germany or Belgium. So we understand we are at the very beginning of, let's say, a long route to reach a hydrogen economy by 2050, since we have a very limited infrastructure for hydrogen. So the question to be answered today, and this is my first question in this presentation, from where we are able to produce this huge amount of demand or forecasted demand by 2050. I am speaking about from 90 million tons today to about 650 million tons by 2050. I think the key determinants that will answer this question from which we will produce this hydrogen, it will be based on 3 main factors. The first one is the economics. Of course, we understand the hydrogen produced from fossil fuels is cheaper if we compare it with green hydrogen, in which the cost can reach about $7 per kilogram. However, we have to consider also the emissions and the environmental impact. We are speaking about hydrogen as a key component of the future energy system and its role in the decarbonization, or we can say the energy transition. So if we compare the fossil fuel, we understand coal can produce about 19 kilograms of CO2 per every kilogram of hydrogen produced, while in case of natural gas, it can be reduced to 10 kilograms. And if we consider CCUS technology in order to capture the CO2 emissions produced with hydrogen produced from natural gas, we can reach about 1 kilogram per kilogram of hydrogen. Of course, in case of renewables, we don't have any emissions. That's why we consider it zero carbon hydrogen, and in comparison with natural gas, it's a low carbon hydrogen in case of natural gas. The third determinant or factors that will affect the production, future production of hydrogen, is the commercial scale. And this point actually usually ignored. We have to understand that today's commercial production of electrolyzer is very limited. The total number of units that can produce on annual basis is about 100 units per year, while the maximum capacity of the electrolyzer is about 10 megawatts. So it can be translated to about 1 gigawatt of electrolyzers that can be produced on a commercial scale nowadays. But if we compare this commercial production of electrolyzers used for the production of green hydrogen with the steam methane reforming units that currently produced, there is no comparison you can say that, because the current production of steam methane reforming units is about 100 units, and the capacity of 1 unit is 1 gigawatt. So if you would like to make hydrogen a key component of the future energy system, we have to consider all these factors together: the economic part, the emissions part or environmental impact of hydrogen, and the current commercial scale of hydrogen. That's why we are here today to speak about the MENA region and how we can introduce ourselves as a potential key producer and exporter of hydrogen. MENA region, as we can see here, we have a massive gas infrastructure in place in which we can use it to transport or even export hydrogen to the nearby markets. We have a unique geographical locations since we have a proximity to the European market, which will be a potential demand center of hydrogen, and we have also a proximity to the Asian markets, not so far from the Middle East. MENA region also has some success factors, including the long-established economic ties between Arab NOCs and the IOCs. All of us know that Arab region is a key player in the oil and gas market, and we have successfully established long economic ties and strategic ties with the key players and the majors in the market. And the last one, we have the natural gas, which can be used to produce hydrogen, and we have renewable energy sources. And here I would like to focus more about the resources in the Arab region. If we are looking to the renewable energy sources available in the region, we can translate or can understand it through three main figures. The first one is the wind atlas of the world. Arab region has a high wind speed that can reach up to 9 to 11 meters per second, and this is the highest if we compare it to any other region in the world. And in terms of solar radiation, which we can see it on the solar radiation atlas of the world, we can have solar radiation up to 2,200 to 2,500 kilowatt per square meter. And the last one, the sunshine hours. Luckily, we have sunshine hours of 3,900 hours. So it can be translated to about 50% of the year we have sunshine hours in the Arab region. So what does it mean? It means that the Arab region has the optimal conditions in terms of solar and wind resources for the green hydrogen production, because if we need to produce green hydrogen, we have to consider the capacity factor of the electrolyzer. I mean, for how much time it will be able to work. So since we have these significant characteristics of our renewable resources, we understand that capacity factor of electrolyzers will be above 60 to 70%. Regarding the natural gas, we are already a producer and exporter of natural gas. And here I will provide with you also some figures regarding the cost of producing natural gas or producing hydrogen in the Arab region, and comparing it with Russia or the European Union. If we look to the right-hand side of the presentation, we can see here the cost of blue hydrogen or gray hydrogen ranges between $0.9 to $1.5 per kilogram. And this is the lowest if we compare it to any other region, as I mentioned, like Russia or European Union. On the other side, if you consider the green hydrogen, it will be, of course, more expensive because we are still at very early stage of deployment of green hydrogen. As I mentioned, still the electrolyzer capacity is very limited to 100 megawatts. And this is also another point that I would like to stress here today. Usually, the cost of hydrogen is available in dollar per kilogram, but we have to consider if we compare hydrogen as a commodity with another commodity like natural gas. So on the left hand side of the presentation, I put natural gas for comparison with different types of hydrogen. In case of natural gas here in the Arab region, it costs us about $4 to $5 per million BTU, which is the common unit used to translate the cost of natural gas in the region or even globally. If we consider gray hydrogen, it will increase to about $9 per million BTU. And if we consider blue hydrogen, which is gray hydrogen with the application of CCS or CCUS, so it can reach about $13 per million BTU. And of course, the case of green hydrogen will be the highest, which can be translated to $32 per million BTU. But in all cases, Arab region, if we look to these numbers or figures, we are the lowest if we compare ourselves to any other region in the world. However, are we able to produce hydrogen in commercial quantity to meet the growing or the expected growing demand on hydrogen by 2050? Of course, we have some challenges, not only in the Arab region, but also in every region, since hydrogen is a new, let's say, a new commodity that we would like to make it commercial and competitive with other commodities like natural gas. The first challenge or obstacle is the feasibility and the funding. We understand the hydrogen will require a high capex, high capital cost. And if we look to the kilowatt of installed capacity of the electrolyzer, it costs around $1,000, from $800 to around $1,000 per kilowatt. And of course, as I mentioned, is the hydrogen itself as a commodity is very expensive if we compare it to other commodities like natural gas. And the funding is also another issue because we are speaking here about a potential market, not a real market. So we have to consider it's a big obstacle to provide or to find the funding sources. On the second challenge is the policy and regulations. Here in the Arab region, we still need to have regulations to cover all aspects of a hydrogen economy, including commercial, functional, and safety codes to deal with hydrogen. However, I can say without governmental support, it's quite difficult to develop the hydrogen economy in the Arab region. The third challenge is the technology itself requirement. If we could speaking about the green hydrogen, we are speaking here about a huge water requirements to produce a kilogram of hydrogen. Just to understand the simple figure, we need about 10 liters of demineralized water to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen. Of course, this is the challenge in a water scarce region like the Arab region. However, we can overcome this problem, as I will show for you in the next slides. High capacity factor is also a big challenge, but as I mentioned, since we have renewable energy sources, we can provide a high capacity factor of 60 to 70% thanks to the renewable energy sources available in the region. Of course, there are some challenges related to storage and the transport of hydrogen because the hydrogen itself has a very low energy density, which means we need a huge area to transport hydrogen, and with the application, of course, of pressure to have a compressed gaseous hydrogen or liquefied hydrogen. Last challenge is the culture and the capacity building because we are dealing here with a new technology. So we need some time, and this can be overcome using training, workshops, and research institutes, and of course with the establishment of R&D program. In the Arab region, on here in the OAPEC, we have a potential strategy in order to scale up the hydrogen economy. In OAPEC, our vision that we can scale up the hydrogen economy in the Arab region through 3 main phases. In the phase number 1, it will be the application of demonstration and the pilot project, which is very important to understand the technology, to develop the knowledge base, and to understand and define the technical challenges. This is very helpful. And already some Arab countries have started this phase to start the demonstration and the pilot project. Of course, here we need the help of the technology providers, the key players in the market, which provide electrolyzers, an example like Siemens Energy. The second stage, which will be the main or the backbone to develop hydrogen economy in the region, is what we call the transition phase, in which the blue hydrogen can play a significant role. In this transition stage, blue hydrogen will help us to understand everything regarding the technology itself, and will help us to develop the value chain because, as I mentioned, we need production, transport, and storage, and of course we have the demand, and also we can be able to finalize everything related to the regulatory frameworks. It can last for about 5 to 15 years after the first phase, in which we will apply demonstration and the pilot projects. The last stage, which will be after 15 or 20 years from now, in which we can play a key player or play a key role in the global trade of hydrogen, in which we can build a large scale, commercial scale of electrolyzers, exploiting the low cost expected to reduce or to be decreased from $1,000 per kilowatt of installed capacity. It's expected to reach about $400 to $500 by 2030, and even less by 2050. So this is our vision in OAPEC, that we need about 3 stages, starting with the demonstration and the pilot projects phase to last about 5 years, then to the transition phase, and finally in which we will be able to be a key player and the exporter of hydrogen. In fact, many Arab countries have shown their interest to invest in hydrogen production. And here I provide with you the number of Arab countries, but we are not at the same level of hydrogen development. And what is known is called a hydrogen strategy or national hydrogen strategy. Sometimes we are hearing that many countries have announced their national hydrogen strategy, but we have to understand to announce or publish the national hydrogen strategy, it's a process usually starts with establishment of R&D programs in order to have a vision why we need to produce hydrogen, how we can produce hydrogen, and then the next two phases of the before publishing the hydrogen national strategy is the roadmap, which identifies the short-term actions needed to deploy hydrogen, and finally the national hydrogen strategy, which evaluates the hydrogen policies with the existing energy policies in any country. I can see here, we in Arab countries, about 10 countries have shown their interest. 3 countries are already preparing their national hydrogen strategy, namely Egypt, Oman, Morocco. 3 or 2 countries are also preparing their hydrogen roadmap, which is the last step before national hydrogen strategy. And there are also some countries that are show interest for hydrogen, which are 5 countries. We have 10 countries that have shown interest, policy interest in producing hydrogen. Many Arab countries also have successfully signed MOUs with different countries on the policy level. Morocco, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Oman have signed MOUs with many countries, including Germany, Japan, Belgium, and this is very important in this phase. And I can just here show for you an important example regarding the significance of Germany as an example. Germany, of course, is a huge market, and the current demand of hydrogen in Germany is about 55 terawatt-hour, which is expected to reach 110 terawatt-hour by 2030. And at that time, Germany will not be able to produce all this amount, so Germany will be a net importer of hydrogen. So dealing with our partners on a win-win situation, so we can produce hydrogen to export them, I think this is very crucial to scale up hydrogen economy in the Arab region. The last part of my presentation, I show for you here the number of announced projects to produce hydrogen in the region. According to our recent survey in OAPEC, there are about 28 projects to produce and export hydrogen announced in the region. Majority of these projects for green hydrogen, including 12 projects for green hydrogen, 6 projects for green ammonia, about 4 projects for blue hydrogen, 4 projects for blue ammonia, and also there are 2 projects to use hydrogen in fuel cells through hydrogen refueling stations announced in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Some key projects, of course, I am sure that all of us know about that, including new project which will have 2 gigawatt electrolyzer fed by 4 gigawatt renewable energy sources to produce about 650 tons of green hydrogen on a daily basis. We have also Wael project which will produce or plan to produce about 1 million tons of blue ammonia per year. There is also a planned green project in partnership with Siemens, which will have 100 to 200 megawatt electrolyzers. Also high port project in the DAC, which will have 250 to 500 megawatt in the first phase, fed by 1.3 gigawatt renewable energy sources. Also, there is a green project in Morocco planned in the last year, which will have 100 megawatt electrolyzers. And the last one, and the last country that had joined the club of hydrogen in the Arab region is Mauritania, which announced 2 projects. One of them is the Amman project, which will have 30 gigawatt of electrolyzers. Not only announced plan, but some countries also have already produced hydrogen, like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Saudi Arabia has already shipped the first, let's say, blue ammonia cargo, about 40 tons of ammonia, and successfully captured CO2 for the production of methanol and also for enhanced oil recovery. And also United Arab Emirates over the past few months has shipped 3 cargos of blue ammonia to 3 Japanese companies. So the momentum started in the region. We are keen to play a key role in the future trade of hydrogen. So to conclude my presentation, I can say for hydrogen to be a key component of the global resilient energy system, we need a large scale hydrogen value chain from production, transportation, and the demand side in order to have, let's say, a competitive commodity like natural gas or oil. Arab region has optimal renewable energy sources for the hydrogen production, and about 70% of the announced project for green hydrogen, green ammonia, and the remaining 30% for blue hydrogen and the blue ammonia. We understand that we are at very early stage of development of hydrogen. However, and there are a list of or a set of challenges and the market barriers, but as I mentioned, we can overcome it by taking the necessary actions. And of course, the strategic partnership between Arab region and the other partners, either in Europe or in Asia, is very crucial to scale up the hydrogen sector in the Arab region. So in my opinion here, I can say that Arab region had the optimal, let's say, the optimal conditions and has a great potential to be a key supplier and the exporter of hydrogen in the near future. Thank you, and I'm ready for any question that may arise from our audience. Thank you.
Just one moment, sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, well, thank you very much for your informative presentation. It was a very great one.
Thanks so much, Mo.
Yes, I think there are around 6 questions remaining in the Q&A box, but before we take any field questions, may we go through some of the pre-collected ones first? I will read them to you.
Okay.
Yes, and the first round of questions is always about projects. Is there currently a specific pipeline of projects planned for key countries looking at hydrogen in MENA region? Which countries do you think is leading the wave, and which country do you think holds the most potential?
Well, as we have seen in our APIC presentation, we have mentioned that many Arab countries have announced plans to export hydrogen. The good news is that we have started the first project in United Arab Emirates in Dubai, which is called Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park. We have started the first project. Oman, I think it will be the next country in the Gulf region or in the Arab region to produce hydrogen. Egypt also has some, let's say, ambitious plan to produce hydrogen. Saudi Arabia already have announced the large or the mega project of NEOM. So I can say we have started, by the way, to produce green hydrogen, as I mentioned, in Dubai. But over the next 4 to 5 years, we will have some projects which will come on stream, commercial project or commercial industrial project, starting from Oman, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, maybe by 2027, and also in Egypt. Morocco also is another example in which the European countries have looked to the Morocco, taking into account the proximity to the European market, and they have agreement with the German government in this regard.
Yes, and you talk about some ground activities already going on right now. Despite big talks, when can we expect the first gigawatt green hydrogen production be operational in MENA?
I think the first gigawatt project will be in Oman, maybe high port in Oman. The project will have in its initial or first phase about 500 megawatts, fed by 1.3 gigawatt renewable energy sources. So I think this project will be the first one to be commercialized, to be materialized and to produce hydrogen. The second project will be also most properly in Oman, because Oman has, by the way, about 7 projects, planned projects for green hydrogen. There are also some another projects which are blue hydrogen. One of them is planned in Egypt by ENI. So we can expect over the next 5 years, we will have many projects come, especially from Oman, Egypt, and United Arab Emirates also.
Very good, very good. And the third question is actually from me personally. It's a problem that keeps me awake in the night. So the water scarcity problem. You touched a bit on this issue, but can you elaborate more on that? Where and how can we avail water from H2 electrolysis in MENA, and at what cost?
This is actually a very important question, in my opinion, and also a significant challenge to develop or to scale up hydrogen, green hydrogen economy in the Arab region. Arab region is a water scarce region. We don't have, let's say, freshwater resources, even not enough for drinking purposes. But if we consider the seawater and consider desalination of the seawater, we can feed the electrolyzers. Of course, we will speak here about extra costs that we will use to desalt the seawater. According to the commercial figures from the key companies in the market, the desalination, if we consider it an extra cost, will increase the cost by about 5%. So we have the water sources, unfortunately not the fresh one, but we have the seawater. But if we consider the extra port, it will increase about by 5%. But at the end of the day, we still very competitive if we compare the cost of green hydrogen here in the Middle East, which is around $3 to $4 per kilogram. If we compare it to about 7 to 8 kilogram in Europe, even they have the renewable energy, even they have the freshwater sources, but they don't have the renewable energy sources, which will guarantee a high capacity factor. So I agree with you, it's a big challenge, but at the end, we can translate it into cost. And at the end, we are competitive. That's why many countries, many European countries are keen to partnership with the Arabian countries like Germany, Belgium, and even United Kingdom. Over the past 1 week, there is also some plans to partnership with the United Arab Emirates.
Great, very well. And one last question before we take field questions. You just gave a very comprehensive introduction about the successful factors and the challenges that MENA region is facing right now. Can you name the top 3 successful factors and the top 3 obstacles when it comes to scaling up the hydrogen production and the trade in MENA or in individual markets?
First one, the resources, which is the feed of the hydrogen. Renewable energy sources, we have it. And as I said, it will provide us with a high capacity factor of electrolyzers. And in case of natural gas, we have also natural gas, which can be used to produce gray hydrogen. And with the application of CCUS, we will have blue hydrogen, which is also accepted by the international community. Second one is the governmental will. And this is very important to advance or to scale up the hydrogen economy in the Arab region. Without governmental support, we cannot expect that hydrogen will be, let's say, a common reality or a reality in the future. And as we can see from our presentations, that the major oil producers or producing countries are the leaders of the hydrogen plants in the region, like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman. So all of them are keen. So the third factor that we have some infrastructure for natural gas that can be used to transport and export hydrogen. So renewable energy sources and natural gas resources, governmental will, and also the network or the infrastructures that can be used to transport and export hydrogen. The 3 main obstacles, in my opinion, again, is the regulations, the part, which is very important. We are still dealing with a new technology. Funding, till now, all the funding are from the major state oil companies here in the Arab region in partnership with the oil majors. So funding is still a big challenge, even that we have a list of projects, as I mentioned. And the last one, as I told you, is the water resources that need for the electrolyzers. But of course, with continuous R&D, we expect that the cost of producing green hydrogen could be lower, and the installed capacity, I mean the capex of the installed capacity, is expected to reduce by 60% over the next 2 decades.
Very well. And if possible, may you kindly open your Q&A box and check the remaining questions in the open column. We will take the first 3. So the first one, do you think there will be a conflict both politically and economically between EV and H2 for transport sectors? It's more into the demand side management.
Again, sorry, between, can I read the question? A conflict between?
Okay, a conflict between EV and H2 for transport sector.
Okay, EV
means electric vehicles, for example, like battery-based vehicles, okay, and hydrogen fuel-based vehicles.
No, in my opinion, we are here, by the way, speaking about the Arab region and the producer and the exporter of hydrogen. We still have very limited applications. As I mentioned, only 2 projects, one in Saudi Arabia and the second one was in United Arab Emirates. But they can complement each other. I mean, they can it's not a competition between electrical vehicles, EVs, or fuel cell electrical vehicles. And by the way, we have also to emphasize here the main sector to consume hydrogen in the future will be the transportation sector. because about 28% of the total demand of hydrogen by 2050 will come from the transportation sector. So we have to understand, we are still at very early stage of development, but transportation sector, and there are some countries, some European countries already started to have trains running on fuel cell electric, on the fuel cell. They have also some plans, some targets. According to our studies here in OAPEC, about 11 million fuel cell electrical vehicles are expected to be on the road by 2030. So I don't think it will be a conflict. It maybe they may complete each other. And of course, we need both of them if you would consider to decarbonize the hard to abate the transportation sector.
Yes, great. And another question with regards to supply chain, I think, from Sukhania. Good afternoon. I would like to know if there's already an industrial ecosystem in Arab countries that can be utilized in developing hydrogen projects. It's more like the supply chain issue, the infrastructure associated, as well as I think it will be the local content with regards to developing hydrogen projects in the region.
Well, as I mentioned, we need in this phase, we need to partner with the international players in the market. And that's why there is no single project have been announced or has been announced by the local content in the Arab region. In all projects, we have a sort of partnership with the key players in the market, like Siemens Energy, like DEME, Belgian DEME company, even some Indian company. I think we will have the CEO of ACME or ACME company, which has a project in Oman. So regarding, to start with the local content, we are still speaking about a very new technology to produce it. Regarding, if I can remember the question, the hydrogen value chain or the infrastructure, I think is the most available option and the most viable one to export the hydrogen from the Middle East will be ammonia tankers. And there are a list of Arab countries, especially in the Gulf region, have announced to produce ammonia and to export it using ammonia tankers in order to reach far regions or like the Asian markets. So in my opinion, we have to produce hydrogen and consider the ammonia as a transportation and the most viable option to export hydrogen from the Middle East. And we have from North African countries like Libya, Algeria, we have, by the way, export the gas pipelines already existing and have a total capacity of 65 BCM annually of natural gas, in which we can use them to have a hydrogen blend with natural gas, and we can assess the capability to transport the pure hydrogen, I mean 100% hydrogen using this existing infrastructure. That's why we are in a very good position if we compare ourselves to any other region, since we have the resources, we have the infrastructure, and we can consider the ammonia tankers as an option to produce and export green hydrogen, green ammonia.
Great, great. And one last question before the session ends. So do you think from Top John, do you think MENA states will play a central part in efforts to develop international certification schemes for blue and green hydrogen projects? Because MENA is expected to be one of the leading region for hydrogen production and export. Do you think there's some policy frameworks or programs that are being discussed right now?
Already started in United Arab Emirates, and thanks for the question from our colleague from the audience. Already started in the United Arab Emirates to consider regulatory framework. But again, as I told you, we are still at a very early stage. But United Arab Emirates has already announced let's say the safety codes, safety and risks code for the use and dealing with hydrogen. And in such phase, which we are now, we need cooperation among Arab countries themselves. So if United Arab Emirates has already taken some advanced steps, I think with cooperation, even under the umbrella of a OAPEC organization, we can have a mutual, let's say, a policy or a regulatory framework to exploit or to invest in hydrogen. So I think, again, I repeat, I emphasize that MENA region, since we are keen at the governmental level to be a key player in the market to produce and export hydrogen, either blue hydrogen, blue ammonia, green hydrogen, green ammonia, we will have to develop the regulatory framework and to develop also policies. And just to conclude also my answer, as I told you, 5 Arab countries are now in the national roadmap or national hydrogen strategy, are in progress. And there is another 5 countries, by the way, we are total 22 countries. So about 10 countries now are taking, let's say, concrete policy actions to consider hydrogen as a key component of their, let's say, export portfolio of commodities like oil and gas. So we are on the right way, and we have to consider we need still some time. So I am just giving some figures here to speak about. We need 1 to 2 decades until we be a key players in the global trade of hydrogen.
That would be great. And as you know, there are 9 remaining questions in the Q&A box, but we don't have time for that. I'd like to firstly say thank you to Wael for joining us and for this wonderful presentation. And it would be highly appreciated if you can stay and address some of the questions in the Q&A box.
Thanks so much again for your kind invitation to OAPEC, and hopefully we will have a sort of cooperation in the near future, in person, in your future events. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think it's time to welcome our second speaker on stage. I'd like to introduce with great honor our second speaker, Mr. Mohamed Ghazali, Secretary General of the Morocco Energy Ministry, the Ministry for Energy, Mines and Environment. As just introduced by Wael, Morocco is currently the leading country in MENA's hydrogen development. If possible, Mr. Ghazali, can you turn on your microphone as well as your camera system and fire up your presentation?
Yes, I'm here. The camera is not...
It's not working?
No, it's not working. There is a problem. There is a... I haven't the authorization to turn on my camera.
Okay, just 1 second. It's supposed to work. Just give me 1 moment. Now it works. Can you see yourself from the screen?
Yes, not yet, but it's turned on. We're waiting to have. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, great. And you know, you are a true influencer in the region, and I believe I should leave more time for you to briefly introduce yourself. Where are you sitting in, and perhaps more about the current policy efforts from Morocco Energy Ministry and what are the steps forward.
Thank you, Molly. Special thanks to Mr. Wael Abdel about his excellent presentation and the numbers, figures that he has presented. Because in Arabic region, we need to have more and more cooperation between us in order to enhance and involve our strategies about hydrogen, because it's very cost to have this industry, and we have a huge potential. So we should have a great cooperation between us. I'm Mr. Ghazali, Secretary General of since 10 days. Our ministry is the Ministry of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. So I'm here with you to participate as a speaker in this event, and it's very great for me and great interest that I'm participating as a speaker at this Impact MENA Hydrogen Series. I take this opportunity also to thank the organizers of this meeting for their invitation. This meeting is an appropriate occasion to show MENA hydrogen prospects and discuss the opportunities offered by the hydrogen sector as any energy vector that will allow the acceleration of the energy transition. Let me, before throw to the international contextual elements, we are now at the center of the growing determination shared by most countries to decarbonize our economies. The current context needs all governments to make major changes, which is why we must now seize the opportunity of hydrogen revolution. This clean energy source didn't have the opportunity to become a vector of the energy transition, but two factors have changed that today. First, with the declining cost of renewable energy, electricity, particularly solar, photovoltaic, and wind energy, there is growing interest in electrolytic hydrogen, which will decline in the 10 years after. Secondly, the costs of using hydrogen are decreasing, especially in fuel cells, mainly due to the increased efficiency to the cells, combined with a decrease in their production cost. It should be noted that the total decarbonization of certain sectors such as transport, industry, and heating may prove difficult by a simple electrification. This problem could be solved by hydrogen from renewable energies, which allows large quantities of renewable energies to be moved from the energy sector to the end use sectors.
Mr. Ghazali, I'm really sorry for interruption. So can you put your slide in full screen mode so we can see the the text more clearer?
I'll ask my my colleague to manipulate this presentation, Mr. Musafir. He will do it.
So okay. we are now exiting the
okay.
Screen sharing mode.
Thank you.
So we need one more minute to adjust the screen because we cannot see your slides now.
Okay. If it's ready, you can give me the sign.
So your colleague is still operating, or you want me to step in and switch the slides for you?
If you want, okay, he manipulate now. Can I continue?
Okay, we are going good.
Okay, let me tell you that the Kingdom of Morocco is now on the right path to succeed in this energy transition. We have voluntarily taken under the high guidance of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, the choice to move towards renewable energies by adopting low carbon energy model of the most attractive in the region. Thanks to this model, we could have today a share of renewable energies of more than 37% in our mixed electricity. On the strength of the results achieved, the Kingdom of Morocco has even set a new target higher following the high oil instructions to exceed the current objectives of 52% of the national mixed electricity with renewable energy set for 2030. The development of hydrogen in Morocco will be achieved progressively to ensure optimal exploitation of the entire potential for both the national economy and for export. In the short term, two pillars will be considered. These are local use as a raw material in industry, in particular for the production of green ammonia in the fertilizer industry, for which Morocco currently imports 2 million tons per year of ammonia, and the export of products from green hydrogen to countries committed to ambitious decarbonization objectives. The medium term is other specific favorable conditions, particularly the reduction in the cost of green hydrogen products and the implementation of environmental regulation will be the development of the first economically viable projects. In the energy sector, yes. Green hydrogen can be used.
Mr. Ghazali, sorry
yes.
for the interruption again. We just noticed that your slides is in French, while as the one you sent to us, the copy on our side is in English.
Okay.
So do you mind if we run the slides so our audience can have a better understanding of the text?
Okay, so
So just give me one moment. Let me share the screen on our side to the right page. And then when you finish one page, you can let us know when to switch to the next page. You just say next.
What you suggest also?
Just give me, yes, we will run the slides for you because our slides would be in English.
Ah, okay, okay.
Right, the
So,
previous one is really hard.
I can continue without slide in order to give the time to my colleague to give you the English presentation. Okay.
Right.
Can I continue?
Yes, of course, of course. Just one second. Let's switch the slides on our side. Yes, and this is the slide. This is the page you were at, and perhaps you can continue the talking and let us know when you want to switch to the next slide.
Okay, can I follow?
Yes, please continue.
In the long term, the business models of ammonia, hydrogen, and green synthetic fuels for export are improving, and the development of green hydrogen technology and industry would accelerate globally, including in our country. This expansion will further evolve through the local use of green hydrogen in industry for heat production in the residential sector and in urban mobility and air transportation. In the transportation sector, long-term development opportunities are primarily in the area of heavy ground transportation and aviation. Some demand may emerge in the transportation sector, likely associated with the green hydrogen used for freight, mining, and public transportation in pilot projects. Hydrogen can also exist in natural form, and he exists in Morocco in underground deposits. Indeed, studies have shown the availability of these sources in many countries, including Mali and United States. In the Morocco case, the National Office of Mine and Hydrocarbons is currently exploring the national potential in this area. In this regards, initial studies have identified certain areas with significant potential, including some with significant concentrations of natural hydrogen surface speech. For about our action plans, in order to facilitate the implementation of this strategy and to satisfy the local demand and optimize exploration of the national potential, notably growth, exports, and action plan based on 3 strategic axes has been set up. It's to support the technological development and cost reduction to implement the best conditions of investment in the green hydrogen industry and its derived products, and size demand opportunities leading to new markets. There is 3 axes: technology axis, investment and supply axis, and market and demand axis. About the first one, Morocco will try to have cost reduction throughout various actions such as R&D and innovation activities, testing new technologies, facilitating cost saving along the value chain, including the development of projects with considerable capacities reach 1 gigawatt. In addition, the kingdom has a valuable base for developing an international research cluster. In terms of public-private partnership, the OCP group will be a driving force through the first production of green molecules, in particular green ammonia. The private sector will encourage the use of a specific share of local products to increase demand for these products. In alliance with the international partners, we will be the projects of an important assistance for the achievement of projects. For the second axis, investment and supply axis, the sector will be structured and organized in clusters to create synergies in the use of infrastructure. To this end, specific regulatory frameworks will be readjusted to accelerate the development of the green hydrogen industry and its derivatives will encourage private investment within markets and demand access regarding to our market opportunities. Europe, as well as countries aiming at reducing their GHG emissions by 2050, will be the main importers of Moroccan green hydrogen added to our local markets, leading by the OCP group. Development of maritime transport of synthetic liquid fuels, the development of appropriate port infrastructure, as well as the development of production, storage, and export infrastructure will be the main drivers for the development of a green hydrogen and derivatives export industry. In addition, Morocco will evaluate the technical feasibility of green hydrogen storage and its derivatives in various forms, including in saline cavities. The storage plan will be developed on the basis of long-term economic and technical modeling of the national energy system and that of interconnected countries. Morocco will also increase the competitiveness of its production of green hydrogen and its derivatives of this information exchange and platform that can serve as a basis of coordinated planning of the different parts of the industry. It will be supported. Infrastructure investment support will be provided for R&D, demonstration, installations, and their scales up. And then industries and private heavy transport companies will be encouraged to create and develop niches for using synthetic fuels. In the conclusion, I would like to conclude by saying that Morocco is well qualified to become an important player in the development of a region green hydrogen market and to become a hub for this sector due to our political determination and strong international partnerships, transparency and quality and equitable legislative and regulatory framework for investment conditions, price of renewable electricity, and important factor for the development of green hydrogen. Morocco has successfully implemented one of the largest wind farms of the continent that will produce the cheapest kilowatt in the world. Exceptional potential in wind and solar energy in Morocco has a great potential in wind energy estimate at 25,000 megawatt on onshore and 250,000 megawatt in offshore. In addition to the solar potential estimate at 6.5 kilometers hour per square meters and per day. In terms of gas infrastructure, Morocco is the process in implementing a TSO, the operating system, so that national champion can take over this part and ensure its permanent development. The experience and expertise accumulated by the institutions and the human resources in many fields as aeronautic, automotive, petrochemical, chemical, successful integration of renewable energies in the national energy system, and we expect to strengthen it further. Growing R&D infrastructure by many platforms in green hydrogen, green ammonia, Nexus in IRIS and the Institute of Research in the renewable energies. Strong regional integration through electricity and gas interconnection with Europe. Morocco's strategic geographic proximity to Europe as a major potential customer. However, the development of this sector still depends on increased investment in the field of research and development so that the technology in this area would be enough mature and competitive. Thus, we can move from demonstration projects to commercial projects, without forgetting that the development of this sector also requires win-win cooperation that takes into consideration of the objectives of different parties in a framework of mutual respect, while supporting the development of projects with a long-term vision instead of short-term projects. Thank you for your kind attention.
camera right now. So can you see me now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Just give me 1 second. Okay, can you see me now?
Yes,
It's
okay.
not a very clear high resolution. So again, Mr. Ghazali, very detailed explanation, and thank you so much for joining. Morocco, already endowed with significant renewable energy resources, is betting on hydrogen as the future fuel. How would you rate the maturity of green hydrogen in Morocco on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 stands for just beginning. How would be your confidence? And how do you
Thank you, Mori. It will be very, very difficult to rate the project's hydrogen in Morocco because of elements of our strategy. But we should, firstly, we should mention that we are in the first stage. We have our strategy. We have signed many MOU. Mr. Wael Abdel have mentioned our MOU with Germany, but there is an MOU with Portugal, and we have authorized 4 or 5 projects in hydrogen production, and we have a very great demand, local demand, because our first group in Morocco who produce fertilizers need to have green hydrogen, green ammonia. So there is our first client, because he consumes now 2 million tons of ammonia, and in 2030 he will consume 3 million tons of ammonia. So there is a very huge potential of our market. It should be mentioned that the kingdom is involved with the development of green hydrogen, the key elements of the green transition of this energy. So if I have to rate our process of hydrogen, of green hydrogen in Morocco, we can have 4 to 5 rates in your stance.
I think perhaps for hydrogen, it's at really a major stage.
Because the first stage is the very big, the very big and difficult one.
Right, right. And Morocco is already leading. Congratulations to all the progress.
Thank you.
And then comes to the second question, is about your perspective on cost effectiveness of H2 as a source of energy, and which renewable energy will mostly be the power source for green hydrogen in Morocco.
As I mentioned in my presentation, we have huge potential for wind and solar power. We have about approximately 25,000 megawatts in onshore and 250,000 megawatts in offshore. And we are determined to explore all this potential in hydrogen and in producing electricity. So about wind and solar will be contributed in this strategy. But this lead of our capital expenditure of system based on green hydrogen technology, which results in a high price of generated green hydrogen. This reduces hydrogen's economic competitiveness in comparison to other fuels, particularly natural gas, and prevents green hydrogen technologies from being widely adopted. And we expect to accelerate the adoption of green hydrogen technology under current conditions. Particularly, application must be identified where green hydrogen could be competitive.
Right. Great. And in terms of obstacles and concerns, what do you think is the biggest challenges that stand between projects and the taking off in the Moroccan landscape?
As you know, and as Mr. Wael Al-Moati said before my presentation, one of the challenges of the project of hydrogen is the CAPEX. And the second one is to have your clients in order to have orders, confirmed orders in order to have permanent production and permanent clients. Now, in our case in Morocco, our challenge is to have partners to invest in this field, because we are approximately at 14 kilometers far from Europe. We have one pipe connection between us and Europe. We have great coordination, cooperation between Morocco and other countries in Europe. So we can have good and huge clients to buy our products. And we have also good client in local market. So this an additional challenges will be the technology in order to adopt it, to have it in Morocco, because our objective is not only to produce and export hydrogen, but our aims and our objective is to have an ecosystem of hydrogen in Morocco. In my first line of presentation, I said that we want to be a hub, energetic hub in the region. So the additional challenges is to build the ecosystem of hydrogen industries. It's not very difficult for us, but it's a challenge that we can take a risk for it, because we have many other experiences before, as aeronautic industries, as automotive industries, as building airports and infrastructure. So we have huge potential and huge condition to reach this objective.
Right, and one question raised by the audience with regards to the land issue. Do we have enough land to accommodate such a great amount of, renewable projects? Can
you repeat? I don't understand the first one.
Yes, with regard to the land. So we have this huge demand for hydrogen from Europe and other nations, and in Morocco, although we have great abundant renewable sources, solar and wind sources, but do we have enough land to accommodate such a great demand?
The land, it's a challenge, but now we have a strategy that we have national commission for hydrogen. There is institution that they elaborate our national strategy, and one of their objective is to solve this problem of land, because projects of hydrogen need more and more lands. But there is many solutions for Morocco to override this obstacle and this challenge.
Great. Looking forward to more solutions on these risks and the challenges. And the next question goes to the logistic criteria of transferring the H2 from Morocco and partnership export destinations with regard to more into the transport area.
Let me say about the criteria and the logistics of transfer. Now there is many solutions to transfer and to transport hydrogen from the production to the clients. There is a pipeline solution, there is a liquid solution, and there is also many solutions that we can combine with hydrogen liquid to be less nocive in his transportation and be more safely. So for this three solution, we can also use the three solution, because we have specific ports in Morocco about energy, and we have a pipeline, and we have also a good chemical and energetic industry in Morocco. So we can use the three ways to transport hydrogen.
Yes, of course. And with regard to transportation infrastructures, because there's an increasing hydrogen capacity in the region. What kind of challenges we may face in the future, and what kind of international collaborations would be needed to tackle these challenges head on?
Yes, as I mentioned, that Morocco only Morocco he can't reach the objectives only with his capacities, because the projects of green hydrogen need the markets, need the technology, adopted technology, need the more capacity of investments. Morocco only with his capacity cannot reach the objective. So I have said that in my in the end of my presentation, that we need to have a big and great cooperation between Morocco, European, Arabic, and other countries in order to develop this field. Because if we do not do, we can't reduce the cost of green hydrogen. Only the cooperation win-win between Morocco and the other Arab countries, African countries, and European countries can reduce this cost. So in technological, in having financement of investments, technological transfer, and market to our projects can make us sure that to reach the objectives.
Yes, and one final question from the audience. So we've been talking about the Moroccan national hydrogen strategy, and are there any risk assessment conducted for the current hydrogen strategy in Morocco, or will there be more international consultation be involved, or we say engaged in the whole strategy making process?
The question is about the risk of our assessment.
It's more like time-to-time assessment on the current strategy.
As I said, the strategy is built by a national commission. So have risk studies and huge details about to implementing this strategy is very important for us. So we will that. Yes, we will that.
Yes.
We will do that.
Great. Great. And I think that's everything about your presentation today. I'd like to say thank you again for all your kind support, and the best wishes to Morocco's hydrogen future. And it will be a great journey. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
Thank you, Moni.
Thank you. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our third speaker on stage, who will be Mr. Rajat Seksaria, CEO of ACME Group of India, which is also one of the largest solar energy developers and asset owners in India. Mr. Rajat, may you kindly open your camera system and do a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, start. We can start.
Yeah, hi, Molly. Is my video feed on?
Oh, yes, the video. Just give me one moment. Let me open the video.
Yes, sounds okay.
Yes, Molly. So can you confirm if my video feed is on?
Yes, Mr. Rajat, we are trying. Just give me one moment. Okay, I think we will be sharing a video. Just give me one moment. Right.
No, so Molly, I was just asking whether I can be seen. I will tell you at that time, please run the video.
Sorry, I'm not sure I follow you.
Yeah,
the video...
Molly, I just wanted to tell you, I was asking whether I am visible in the screen. Please run the video when I tell you.
Yes, you are visible.
Okay, so allow me to speak. I'll give an introduction of ACME myself, and then during the course, I will also ask you to run the video of 2 minutes.
Okay, no problem. Please go ahead, back to you.
Okay, so thanks Molly, and thanks organizer for inviting ACME group. So my name is Rajat Seksaria. I am the CEO for ACME group. I'll just take a couple of minutes to introduce ACME and then come to the topic at hand. So ACME group is an India-based renewable power developer. We have a portfolio of roughly 9 gigawatt, both under operation project and in construction and in development projects. We will be one of the largest solar developers in India. We will be one of the top 3 solar developers in India. And ACME is known in India primarily for its technological innovation and for bringing the cost of power down in India. So ACME Group was the first company in India which brought the solar power tariffs to around 3 cents to a unit, which was done in 2017. That was the lowest. This was the lowest project we had. That was the lowest tariff project that we had developed, and even today that continues to be among the lowest tariff project which is commercially run in India. Now, around a couple of years back in ACME, when we were strategizing, we realized there is only so much you can do in terms of producing more solar, and the real problem of decarbonization is not in power, but the real problem of decarbonization is in the non-power energy sector. Everyone knows that only around 20% of the power that globally we consume, only 20% of the energy we consume is in form of power. Almost 80% of the energy we consume is in form of other sources, including hydrocarbons. So that is an area we thought is a real problem area which also needs to be attacked and solved by renewable developers. And that is when around 2 years back, we had taken a bet that we will move into the field of green hydrogen and derivatives of green hydrogen. So when the world had not started talking too much about it, almost 2 years back, we started investing in a small plant in India in a place called Bikaner, which is in the province of Rajasthan. And this plant has solar modules, it has electrolyzer, and it has ammonia synthesis glue. This plant we have physically completed just this month. And to our knowledge, this is probably the world's first integrated solar, electrolyzer, and ammonia setup at one location. When we were working further, we realized that one of the biggest challenges for adoption of green hydrogen or green ammonia would be to produce the product at very, very cost competitive rates. And this was because while the world has been talking a lot about green decarbonization, hardly any country still today has a very specific policy in terms of giving special financial incentives so that green products can be sold at a different price. There are multiple talks, multiple policy which people are talking, but as on date, we still don't have a proper policy which can give you commercial advantage in green hydrogen or ammonia. So we realized we need to produce the end product at a very, very competitive rates. And then we realized to produce the green hydrogen, almost 70% of the cost is the cost of renewable power. And we then backward calculated and realized the cost of renewable power has to be 2 cents to a unit or lower for the green hydrogen or green ammonia to be something which is cost competitive. And then we started scouting for various places globally. We realized there are few geographies like Chile, Western Australia, some places in Gulf, where you can get good radiation, solar radiation, and good combination of radiation and wind, where you can produce solar power at a competitive rate. We started discussing with various governments, but the government that we got good traction was the government of Oman. And sometime in early this year, we signed a facilitation agreement with Oman, and we decided to make a large investment in Oman, where we are setting up a 2,400 tons per day green ammonia facility. To put 2,400 tons per day in perspective, 2,400 tons per day would, on an annualized basis, mean roughly 0.8 million metric tons per annum. And again, to make it a comparison, the NEOM project, which is one of the best known projects which is being developed is roughly 1.2 metric million tons per annum. So the project we have is smaller than NEOM, but not very small. So we are at 0.8 million metric tons per annum. We then realized that the global appetite for funding this kind of projects, at least the first of its kind project, may be slightly low. So we modularized the 2400 tons into modules of 300 tons per day. Each of these modules was identical in nature and could be expanded as the demand grew. So we have started pre-construction work for the first 300 tons per day module in Oman. We already got the land, a large piece of land from government of Oman. We have started all the basic studies that are required, the environmental studies, the hydrological studies, the topographical surveys. So all those works have already been started. We have already made our technology selection for ammonia for this project, and KBR is our technology partner. The media announcement for the same was just made, I think, around 10 days back. So KBR technology will partner with us for this project. So this is the project that we have developed, and we are developing in Oman, and we are targeting that sometime early next year, first quarter of next calendar year, we should be able to break ground on this project. And another 18 months from then, we should have the first ammonia, green ammonia produced for shipping out. So this is the journey we have till far. So we already have a small demo plant. There is a large master plan of project that we are developing in Oman. We are in discussion with multiple countries to set up similarly sized large plants in places like Australia, Chile, and some of the other countries we are discussion with. So before I go forward, Molly, I just want to show a small video of our Bikaner plant, which is now physically completed, already producing green hydrogen, and has just started producing ammonia. So maybe if you can run that video that we were talking for a couple of minutes, that will give a small glimpse of how a typical integrated solar electrolyzer based and ammonia based plants looks like. So my request to you, Molly, if you can just play that video for a couple of minutes.
Sure, will do. Just give me one moment. Let me share the screen. Okay, can everyone see the screen right now with video on?
Welcome to the world's first green hydrogen and green ammonia plant, developed by ACME Cleantech Solutions Private Limited, a true example of Make in India. The plant is located in Bikaner in Rajasthan, India. Here, renewable power generated from solar PV plants is used to produce green hydrogen. The nitrogen is captured from atmosphere. Using this green hydrogen and nitrogen with the Haber-Bosch process and ammonia reactor, green ammonia is produced. The complete process is carbon-free. Renewable power is supplied from an integral part of the project, a 5 megawatt peak solar PV plant, also expandable up to 10 megawatt peak. Green hydrogen is produced by splitting purified water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen without using fossil fuels, using an electrolyzer. This technique is very clean and produces more than 99.999% pure hydrogen gas. The air available in the atmosphere is pressurized through the air compressor and being buffered by the filter and air dryer. This process produces 99.5% nitrogen. The green hydrogen and nitrogen are mixed and preheated up to 200 degrees Celsius. The product stream then enters into ammonia synthesis converter. Then it's further heated to 360 degrees Celsius. The final product is ammonia after being cooled in subsequent heat exchangers like cooling water exchanger, cold heat exchanger, and ammonia chiller up to -20 degrees Celsius. The produced liquid green ammonia is stored in the pressurized vessel, which can be transported to anywhere in the world. Green ammonia can be used for power generation, marine fuel, fertilizer, and various other industrial applications. This is also used for hydrogen carrier for bulk transportation of green hydrogen from one place to another. By using world-class technology, the process is 100% emissionless. ACME, leading through innovation.
Thank you, Molly, for playing that video. So I just wanted to tell the participant that that small audio visual was actual videography of the plant that we have completed. It is a 5 megawatt solar panel based plant, but this is a semi-commercial scale plant, which is something we started working almost 1.5 years back. And as a team, as a company, it has given us a lot of learnings, which we are going to now incorporate as we do industrial scale plants in this sector. So this was the brief introduction about the company ACME. I think I would now spend next few minutes kind of sharing some of the experiences and some of the challenges that we are either facing or likely to face as we become one of the prominent developers of green hydrogen and green ammonia project. I think the number one challenge which all developers would face, that this particular sector is effectively a marriage of power sector and industrial gases sector or oil and gas sector, right? Which these two sectors fundamentally commercially operate in a very, very different way. A lot of power that we as renewable power developers have over the years developed, or projects that we have developed, is on the basis of long-term 20 or 25-year power purchase agreements, fixed price power purchase agreements in many cases. So that underpins the economics. But unfortunately, a lot of hydrogen, or more specifically ammonia, which is sold, is not sold on a long-term fixed price basis. There could be a long-term agreement, but many of the contracts are actually sold on a spot prices basis. So that is where the commercial risk gets accentuated, as it is difficult for both the equity investor and the debt provider to know what would be the actual revenue from the plant. So this is the number one challenge that I think solar developers would face. So the option is either doing the plant through full equity, in which case the cost of equity is more and the end product will be costly, or project financing will be difficult until someone can manage and get a large long-term contract with some assurance on the price. The number two challenge that people would face is, effectively there are three different sectors which are being three different projects which are being kind of integrated. There is a renewable power, which for example companies like us understand. There is an electrolyzer and there is ammonia. So there is very less common knowledge bank that any company has. Typically the companies who have been operating in either of these fields are mutually exclusive. Same goes for the contractors or the operators, right? So effectively what we are doing is we are getting electricity and chemistry mixed. And there is, while the technologies have been around for multiple years and decades in the case of ammonia and hydrogen, but no one has an experience of operating such a large variable power based plant running hydrogen and ammonia. Ammonia, as you all know, is a process plant, and process plant typically performs best when it runs in a 24/7 mode. But the challenge here would be the power that one generates either through solar and wind or through a combination would be very variable in nature. So how do you size the plant? What are the kind of algorithms you develop? What storage of ammonia you create? What storage of hydrogen you create? How do you assure a constant supply to your off-taker? A lot of demand people would have as off-takers is that while they are willing, they may give you take or pay obligation, but they would expect a supply or pay counter clauses. So as a variable power which is powering your hydrogen generation or ammonia generation, how do you assure a constant supply? That is another challenge people would face, and they would have to find their own ways of finding solution to this problem. Third problem that developers would face, we are facing that challenge, but we are making progress, is while a lot of financing entities are well intentioned, they have the mandates to do green projects, but none of them have ever done such kind of a project. So I see a lot of conservatism there, a lot of apprehension. So not many are willing to bell the cat. Everyone is looking towards each other, but we are not still finding leaders on the financing side who would say, okay, we'll take this thing in the larger interest. And so there is still a tentativeness among various financing institutions. The fourth challenge that people would face is that typically places which have good solar radiation or good wind loads tend not to be the markets of this product, right? So let me give an example. The most likely market for ammonia and hydrogen could be, say, Japan or maybe some parts of European countries, but then they are possibly not blessed with the kind of solar radiation. So you will have to produce produce these products in areas which are probably not very close to the consumption hotspots. So how do you create that logistic infrastructure? How do you create those kind of integrated contracts which takes care from feed till the final consumption concept? This is another challenge that people are going to face. Fourth challenge is the last challenge is the capital cost. I have still not come across people who know with certainty what is the capital cost, right? A lot of costs are changing. Unfortunately, last 3 to 6 months, we have seen huge variations and increase in commodity costs. Commodity cost, whether it is solar panels, steel, it is some of the other components which goes into these plants. So in the face of such high cost, how do you still produce a cost competitive end product? So these are some of the challenges that I believe solar players will face initially. One more challenge that I would highlight before kind of I pause is long-term contract. The fear a lot of off-takers is, what if in 10 years time or 15 years time the prices drop? So they don't want to get locked into a contract which is attractively priced today but may not be that attractive say 10 years down the line. But so that is a challenge a lot of these off-takers are facing. So these are some of the challenges we are facing. I can tell you that company like ACME, which is probably not as big as some of the oil and gas companies, but we are a nimble-footed company. We are an entrepreneurial company, almost a flavor of a startup. So we are able to take a lot of decisions. We are able to do a lot of course correction. We are able to kind of move at a much faster pace, spend much of our energy developing this project. And we are very, very hopeful that we will, as a company, be among the first players to bring ammonia, green ammonia and green hydrogen at an industrial scale. For our case, being an entrepreneurial company, we have chosen our horse. We have taken that leap of faith. So we are still not tentative. I think that's the decision we have made, and we are already investing money in this project and attracting very, very good names as we go forward. And people who are interested in these sectors would hear a lot about us and some of the partnerships that we are striking in the sector. So for the moment, I think I have packed in a lot of stuff. I would just give a pause, and I would be very, very happy to take or dwell on any of the factors that I have discussed in my project, in my short speech, and maybe answer some of the queries that you may have.
Yes, of course. Let's start with one question from the audience Q&A from Saif. He says, thank you very much, Rajat, for the informative presentation. First of all, what are the key factors that ACME have considered for feasibility to select Oman precisely as a location for hydrogen and green ammonia production? Why this country? Why this land?
I think that's a very, very good question. See, we are an India-based developer. All our solar projects we have done in India. We have done 56 projects in India. And India also has relatively good solar resource. But when we were doing our calculations on how can we produce at the almost the best possible price, Oman was one of the geographies which came up in that equation. It was not only Oman, it was a few other geographies that I earlier mentioned. So we started dialoguing with all these geographies and the authorities concerned. Oman is where I think we got good response from the concerned authorities and the government. On top of that, we are doing project in a place called Duqm, which is a very, very strategically located port come SEZ. And there are, I think, a couple of other players also trying to develop it. So the advantage it has is, from a logistics point of view, it's very well connected. It has good solar resource. It has one of the very rare places which also coincidentally has very good wind resource, right? So you can kind of almost do a hybrid renewable power project. Though in our first phase, we are doing solar, in second phases will include hybrid. So these are the advantages it has. And one more advantage is which is not obvious, but someone who understands solar sector would understand, the relative temperatures in Oman are a bit lower compared to some of the other areas in the region. Why lower temperature are important? This may sound counterintuitive, but you get actually better solar radiation if you are closer to 25 degrees, right? So a place with say 30 or 35 degrees is much better than say 40 to 45 degrees centigrade temperature, because there is a negative coefficient of solar generation with temperature. So this temperature profile also kind of helped Oman. So I think it was an overall package that we could get, and we could get very good piece of land in Oman, you know, and since government was very keen on developing this particular area as a hub of green hydrogen, we could get good kind of facilitation in terms of fast-paced decision making. And that is why our first large project we are doing in Oman. Having said that, we are in discussion with at least 2 or 3 more geographies where we would like to put plant of similar size. If we have representatives from other countries who are attending this and they are interested, inviting someone like ACME, will be very, very happy to consider their place in geography as well.
Yes, you are absolutely right. Oman, you just mentioned the port of Duham, and we also have a port of Sohar, where we can have a lot of international knowledge transfer between Oman and Netherlands and Belgium, for example. And also one more question from the audience with regards to cost competitiveness. As you mentioned that for demonstration projects, it can be very costly for the early stage CapEx. And what's ACME's strategy to reduce the cost, to reduce the, in the future, how would you plan to reduce the compression, storage, and distribution costs?
So I will only give a slightly more general answer to this. Some of these are a bit IP related, so I can't go into depth. But see, the cost reduction that one needs to achieve is not only on the compression and storage cost, it has to be across the value chain, because we are treating this as an integrated project, right? Whether it is renewable park or is it electrolyzer or it's ammonia or say compression and storage, right? So we are looking this as a complete chain. And one thing that we have realized that someone, in order to reduce the cost, needs to establish a global supply chain, right? And we have seen very categorically that some of the items that is mentioned here or I have mentioned, between various geographies, the cost could be very, very different, right? The challenge that people faced, a lot of these items were not done at the scale that we are envisaging. So one needs to be able to leverage the ability of scale. Secondly, for each of this component, one needs to do a very, very basic grounds up analysis of what constitutes the cost, right? How much of steel goes into this, how much of it is a technology cost, right? And that is where you can do the vendor, you can do a kind of vendor development play also. One thing which I think is important, which worked well in say solar, which could work well even in hydrogen ammonia, that we cannot allow the market to be a 2 or 3 player market in terms of vendor suppliers. The real cost advantages would only come if we can have a globally as an industry a much larger vendor base. That is where the real efficiencies in cost come in. The areas where we have globally 2 or 3 or 5 vendors only, that is where we see that cost is not something which one can really manage. So it is important to diversify the global supply chain, use a global supply chain, and have vendor development efforts. Then only I think we can reduce the cost. Because if you just start integrating a plant based on the best names available, right? Only the best names available, you may find that the cost will be so high that the end product will not be competitive. It will not be bought by any off-taker because it will be big risk for the off-taker.
Yes, great explanation. And ACME also has projects in India, similar projects in India. Can you suggest the price per kilogram in case of green hydrogen in India? What's your estimate on the price of green hydrogen at the moment, and as well as the price in India right now?
Okay, so I'll give ranges, Molly. As you can understand, it's not possible for me to give exact number. So a green hydrogen in India should cost around $2.5 to $3 a kg in India right now, because there is a taxation and some of the other costs also involved. A similar project in a good location, say Oman or some other countries, a good developer can target a green hydrogen at around $2 or maybe even a kg.
Okay, I think our audience, Herman, shall be satisfied with your answer for the moment. And as you also mentioned, you are encountering quite a lot of funding issues, the funding challenges. What are the final offtake options for green H2 and green ammonia, in your opinion?
A couple of things which is important, Molly. See, this is a new industry, we all know, in terms of taking it to industrial scale. So we need to all see what is the path of least resistance, right? The path of least resistance in developing this industry right now is selling ammonia and not hydrogen. So we don't believe hydrogen will become industrial scale in next 2-3 years. It will still take some time. The applications and the use cases are still being developed. Fortunately for us, ammonia, which is a carrier of hydrogen, has a ready-made application, as I think your earlier speakers were also mentioning. So there is already 180 million tons of ammonia annually consumed. Most of it is gray ammonia, right? So if someone can produce green ammonia at cost which are not too much higher, a bit higher maybe because of green component, we have a ready-made market which we can target, right? The challenge on the funding side is not that the funding is not available. There is so much of liquidity globally. So many institutions have the mandate to specifically do projects like this. For example, in our project, World Bank is willing to fund it. The challenge is because this is something unknown for many people, right? So they are taking probably the level of analysis and due diligence will be a different kind. And that is where I think the challenge is for eventually for them to take decision. In a normal renewable project, they would have decided in say 2 months time. Here they may take 3 or 4 months times for getting through a cruise. So that is a challenge. The second challenge which I mentioned, but I'll not give the solution. The solution was there in the question is, it is ability to get a long-term offtake agreement, right? If you can't get a long-term agreement with some price assurances, it would be very, very difficult for project financing institution to give you a long-term fund. And if you don't get long-term fund, then the viability of the project will go for a toss.
Yes, thank you so much for your kind explanation. And I think it's a great input for our concluding session of today, which will be the funding, the capital and funding support to make MENA hydrogen succeed. And we have 2 multilateral banks who are ready, who are committed to reduce emission. And let's hear what they will say at the last session. And it would be great if you can stay and listen.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Mr. Rajat, for having you here. I know it's quite late in India, and I hope you enjoy it tonight very well. Thank you so much. And I think it's time to welcome our 4th speaker on stage, who will be Mr. Paul Van Son, President of DII Desert Energy, and also one of the founding members for MENA Hydrogen Alliance. Paul has over 40 years of industry experiences, which I believe there's a lot to learn from him. And without further ado, let's welcome Paul on stage. Paul, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
I cannot see myself yet.
Oh, right. Just one moment. Let me see what's going on right now. Okay, can you firstly hear the screen?
Yes. It works. Hi, Molly.
Hi, great to see you here. And let's get right into your presentation. May you kindly share the screen to your side and perhaps do a little bit introduction about yourself, DII, as well as your practices right now.
Yes, of course. Well, let me start here. Actually, myself, in the last 12 years, I'm heading this big movement of renewable energy or emission-free energy from the deserts in MENA, Middle East, North Africa. So I know this region. I'm from the Netherlands myself, but I was leading this industry group, which is an international industry group with the European, African, Asian, and American companies. And actually, the purpose is to bring the region as an emission-free region, so emission-free for itself in the coming decades, but also as a motor for the world, also an exporter at the end of the day. As you know, is the big deserts, like the MENA deserts alone, they get so much energy from sun and wind, and even hydro here and there, that 6% of the surface would be sufficient to power the world, just to get an idea. And that was the basis of our work that was called Desert Tech 12 years ago, as a movement or an idea to capture this energy. So in these years, and there's also a lot of learnings from 12 years ago, where we stand. In those days, there was almost no renewable energy in the whole region. only very few wind, almost no solar. So we started from scratch. It is a little bit the same situation as we see today with hydrogen. And in those days, renewable energy was extremely expensive. So it needed a lot of government support, and not many people believed in it. So when we started with these ideas, in many places we were ridiculed. People said, "Ah, this will never happen," or "We have oil and gas, and we do not really need these renewables." Of course, there were some countries like Morocco and some others that had this vision in the very beginning, but most of the other MENA countries were not that far. So we did a lot of studies, what we called Desertec 1.0, about how can you capture the energy, and then how can you make sure that this energy is being used in the local markets in the first place. So this is actually what we did in the last 10 years. And what we see in the last few years is that it's not only a matter of renewable electricity power, but also now molecules. Hydrogen is actually the first step as an energy carrier for virtually all industries. I think all speakers before me have indicated the application of hydrogen as a basis for many other molecules and for many industries in the whole society. So that is actually what we have done. It is important always to see, if you talk about green electrons, of course you can also talk about blue. Blue is more the other way to produce hydrogen, emission-free hydrogen from natural gas, for instance, and then capture the CO2. And the green path, of course, you produce it immediately without emissions. So these green molecules, they need first of all the green electrons, and that's very important always to underline. So there are no green molecules without green electrons. So and if you see the good news, like 25 to 10 years ago, when we started 12 years ago, the price, the cost level of solar and wind was very high. Solar was something like 25 cents per kilowatt hour, and wind maybe about above 10 cents. And today, as you can see in many projects in North Africa and Middle East, they are approaching or even a little bit under 1 cent per kilowatt hour. So there's a massive decline, and that changed the world dramatically, because if the costs are very low and you don't need subsidy, then it's much easier to push a market. And what we have seen in the last, especially in the last few years, is an explosion of projects. We have a database in our industry group, which consists of 50 companies worldwide. We also monitor the project plans and the realized projects. Not all of the plans will be realized. Actually, a lot of plans are never realized, but still, it shows the high interest in the world or in this region. It is on solar, thermal, solar PV, and wind. And what we will now also see more and more is hydrogen projects, and even a few storage projects like pumped storage, like we see in the UAE and in Morocco, and also, of course, some incidentally hydro plants. And from the power side, a lot has been done, a lot of studies connecting continents, especially with our Chinese colleagues of State Grid of China, which is one of our partners. We did a lot of studies on connecting Europe with North Africa, with Africa and with Asia. And a lot of these grids are being connected step by step by grid operators, by countries. But there are also very interesting projects. So I only want to see you, to show it to you. We are now involved a little bit in a project in the private sector, a cable link between Morocco and the UK. So that's a very interesting one. It's like, I think it's more than 3,000 kilometers. And one 1.8 gigawatt connectors. So this is a very massive thing, and it shows how important connections of markets will be. Connections on the electrical side, and if you can do it on the electrical side, then most likely on the gas side will even be more lucrative, because gas transport is much cheaper than, emission-free gas, much cheaper than electricity. If you talk about the price level of green hydrogen, and we have heard a lot of questions about it already in this session, then there can be everything will happen with the cost of hydrogen. There's a gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and green hydrogen in the coming time. If we get economy of scale and we get more markets and so on, then for sure this cost level will reduce. And if you look like what are the most important factors for this reduction, is first of all the electricity price. And if you recognize that the electricity side, the power side, you got from 25 cents 10 years ago to 1 cent today, then you can also see that, and we are not at the end, that green hydrogen will become very, very competitive. And here you can see that depending on the full load hours and the electricity price, you see that the electricity or the hydrogen prices, what is also confirmed by Rajat in this session, it is approaching $2 per kilogram today already. And of course, also capex is very important. So lower capex, then immediately the price of hydrogen will drop further. And with the outlook that we see is that hydrogen will has a lot of room to further go down in cost. Then the good news also, and it has been also highlighted by Mohamed Ghazali, that there is already gas infrastructure, natural gas. And it is very easy to mix, to inject in the first 10, 20, even 30% of hydrogen can be done easily, added to this grid, so it can be transported to the load centers. Of course, that is then in the sense of less emissions, and not as a per se a green molecule as such, but to a greener gas mix. And especially Europe is looking in this, and it will definitely be one of the wishes of the clients at the end of the day, to get cheap transport and also be able to do this quickly. So this is something we are looking into. We have heard a lot of information from the 3 speakers already. Wael gave a very good overview of what is happening in the whole market on hydrogen as such. If we look from our side, like when we started, the big first mover in those days was Morocco. And they started with the green electrons, with electrical power, solar and wind. They had plans, and they showed that a country in North Africa is able to implement this. So it worked. If you see now 10 years later, Morocco has almost 2,000 megawatt solar and almost 2,000 megawatt of wind, and also some hydro and pump storage and so on and so forth. So this is really working, and they are also, we're one of the few a couple of years ago when we talk to them and work with them, like EBRD and other institutions, they are very on top of hydrogen, and they are developing their plans and the first pilots. Another mover that we see, and it helps us a lot in our industry group, is NEOM. NEOM is one of the lead partners in our industry group. As already been mentioned by the previous speakers, in Saudi Arabia, the northwest side is an area as large as Belgium, and that will be developed totally emission-free. And one of the highlights projects is a big green ammonia projects, and also ammonia, especially because it's cheaper to transport. This ammonia can be transported into the world markets. There is a market for ammonia, and then a green ammonia can be offered instead of gray. And there will definitely be emerging markets. They show already that at large scale, like it's a $5 billion project, this is possible. And it's actually what Rajat in Oman, you see the same thing as Rajat showed. Oman also goes now together with ACME into large scale. And that really makes it able to speed up things. Another interesting, not from the large side at this moment, but from trying out is, and first movers is for instance, UAE with Dubai. Dubai is also the first electrolyzer being put in operation. It's a small one together with Siemens. And it is always together with international parties, with international suppliers, with international providers, but leaded or controlled and pushed by the local governments. In the UAE, these are the rulers, like we see in Morocco and in Egypt and in Oman and other countries. The governments, the rulers, and the leadership, they push this development, and that's very important. Also, Abu Dhabi has different projects and plans. Saudi Arabia, a part of NEOM, has it also across the board. Also with Aramco, we see movements and initiatives. So that not only in the area of green, but also blue. Actually, from the point of view of hydrogen, we are always talking about the no emissions. So green and blue are both compliant with no emissions at the end of the day. So they are the first step in the market to bring the value chains into lower emission mode. Oman, I don't have to say a lot about, because Rajat already highlighted the Oman development. Oman is very open to hydrogen. They're very pushy, and work with international partners, with like ACME project, but also with harbors, the port with 𝗘𝐲𝐬 in Belgium, and the port of Rotterdam, and with others. Egypt is now coming very fast. They signed different projects with Siemens, but also with 𝗘𝐬𝐬, with ThyssenKrupp. Most of them are partners of our industry network, so we are in close interaction with these projects. And we always, what we are looking at is where are the hurdles, and how can you relieve these hurdles, so to speed up this project. And Morocco, here in this list, I already highlighted. Morocco signed an MOU with Germany, so to develop the first hydrogen project, like 100 megawatt electrolyzer. Yeah, also interaction with Portugal. We see the same thing actually also with Tunisia. Yet it's very young, that the German government, they have funds for countries like Tunisia to set up their plans for hydrogen. What we do as an industry group, actually we are a market enabler. Our job is to help the market, to help governments, to help the private sector, to relieve hurdles and to show them where to go. And apart from the project database, where we show projects, what's going on and where are problems, what is also very interesting these days and very popular is the cost models for hydrogen, so the levelized cost of hydrogen from source to sink, and also of green ammonia nowadays. So we can see what are the cost components, how is for instance green hydrogen relating to blue and to green, and that is for the market very important to see what's going on, how are these developments, what is the most competitive solution under what circumstances. If you see, for instance, from this cost model, this very interesting one of the latest analysis, we found out that the green ammonia, in the cases that you can build it these days at a decent size, and I'm quite sure that Rajat can confirm that. Let me see that. That you see that green ammonia is already cheaper today than gray. That's an eye-opener, and that's just about cost analysis. So if we will see in the coming years that green ammonia will be immediately competitive in the market. So that's even if there are no costs for emissions. Then what we also did is the cooperation between Europe and North Africa. Like the European Commission and also the North African countries are talking about exchange of energy, actually to develop both the hydrogen market in North Africa and in Europe, and to connect these two. That is the famous 2x 40 gigawatt initiative of the European Commission. Actually, we did this study. It was an initiative of DII in our MENA Hydrogen Alliance. But also another point, and it has been highlighted also before, of course, the most important is that we have not a new colonialization or something like that, but that the countries in North Africa, Middle East, that they take the lead and they also have the benefits and they create jobs. So we did a study with Roland Berger about the potential of hydrogen, like in the Gulf states, but also at the end of the day in North Africa, and the localization, like what kind of new industries, what kind of jobs will be created. And the big figure that came out is that in the coming decades, about alone in the Gulf states, 1 million jobs will be created in this whole energy transition. And then if you look at the use of hydrogen, and this question we always get, of course, like, is there a need for hydrogen? Is there demand for green hydrogen? Well, where we just start. So there is not much demand today. And it's only a demand in countries like Germany or Netherlands or Japan and some others that really have a combination of a lack of energy, or some pressure on energy as such, and a very strong pressure on emissions. These regions, like also the United States these days, and Europe and Japan and China, and even more. And since the Paris Agreement of 2015, at the end of the day, all countries in the world, almost all countries, they have promised to bring emissions down. And we see also that many countries have a 2050 emission-free targets, and that will be the big driver of green hydrogen, or maybe also blue hydrogen, is to enable the energy carriers without energy. And the MENA region will play a major role because they are one of the major green energy producers, or the potential green energy producers in the world with their big deserts. So the Europe and Asia, East Asia, will become very attractive markets. So the art will be to export hydrogen or hydrogen products, emission-free, at a low cost and with high security of supply. So yeah, like I said, if we talk about hydrogen and about the question, is the MENA ready for hydrogen? Well, in principle, they are ready. I mean, they are all countries that have shown that they can produce green electrons or green power. But it is not only the question, are they ready? But the more important question is, what are the benefits to MENA? they should, these countries should all feel benefits like lower or economic developments, diversification, lower cost of energy, higher security, innovations, job creations, and also zero emissions. Actually, there are a whole lot of benefits, and that's for us, for our initiative, that's in the foreground. Here you can see, and I skipped now quickly the list of all the companies that work together. It is, like I said, from different countries, also strong German companies like Siemens and ThyssenKrupp, the steel company, and ABB, and many others, but also Mazen and Neom and Masdar and many other companies in the region. So just to close this part of my session, this desert tech idea, and we are now at the moment at the third phase, like MENA to become emission-free in a couple of decades, but also to become a leader in the world and an exporter of green energy. That MENA has demonstrated its ability to pull off the regional green energy market in the last 10 years due to lower solar and wind costs. And MENA already has about 20 gigawatts installed today, and is only at the beginning. Then we see national strategies, we see local initiatives, small-scale pilots, but also first large-scale projects, like in Neom, like in Oman. And they are emerging in some of these leading countries. And also Europe and Japan, but very soon also others, they will be the emerging off-takers of green energy. And what is very interesting, that has to be developed further, that is the quick win that we have. Because the existing gas infrastructure can be used already for transport. Of course, at the end of the day, you also have the tankers, like LNG today. They will be transformed to hydrogen or ammonia or different molecules. Then the highlight is, at the moment, this combination of NEOM and Aqua Power and Air Products that they are really pushing for the largest scale facility for green ammonia, and then have a direct connection to the world markets. So Molly, that is about what I show you now, and I'm now, of course, available for questions and answers.
Paul, deep appreciation to your kind, informative address. You absolutely, you literally let me run out of my questions. All the pre-selected questions have been adequately addressed by you. So we can get straight into our audience Q&A session. And one more question from Saif to Paul. Thank you very much for the great presentation. From your perspective, in terms of priorities to achieve net zero emissions in MENA, should the renewable energy infrastructure be used for hydrogen production or as an alternative for fossil fuels in electricity generation?
Yeah, I don't know if I understand the question. And actually, I'm looking how I can see you, because I don't see you at the moment. Let me see.
Yeah, you need to exit the full screen mode.
Okay, the full screen mode.
Right, and open the Q&A box. In the open column, there's two remaining questions for you. One is from Saif and one is from Said.
Yeah, well, is it the first? Is the cost of hydrogen per displayed? I have either Stefan. No, I have Stefan. Where is it? Said?
Said, just scroll down the below.
Syed Ahmed. Okay, sorry. Yeah, could you please comment on commercial viability of blue and green ammonia versus gray ammonia? Well, I mean, blue and green ammonia are products that aim at no reduction, no emissions, and there will. The question is more like, who is, where's the market? What's the demand? Which industries pay what and where are they? So at this moment, this is not yet in place. So there is first countries like Germany, for instance, is putting high emphasis on green hydrogen, but not yet on green ammonia, by the way. But if you have a customer somewhere in the world that wants to buy a green hydrogen, then they can buy green ammonia and easily get the green hydrogen out of the green ammonia. So it's a question of an emerging market in which cost and delivery costs actually, so costs including transport play a role. And as we see in the model, a green ammonia today would be cheaper than blue ammonia today, or gray ammonia today. That's an eye opener. So we expect that this market of green ammonia can take off very, very fast.
Yes, and the question I just mentioned is from Saif. The question above Saeed Aman's question. So it's about, I think it's about the combination of renewable energy plus hydrogen facility. So you think, so the Saif's questions is more like, do you think all the renewable energy infrastructure should be used for hydrogen production, or it's more like a supplement or an alternative for fossil fuels in electricity generations?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Actually, if the purpose of all this hydrogen and green hydrogen is less emissions. And I think the first step in less emissions is the electrical side locally. So if there is local electrical demand that you can serve, as long as there is locally a lot of fossil or emissions demand, or a lot of oil and gas, and the first thing is to replace that, to substitute that before you think of producing hydrogen. Hydrogen is only an added value at the moment that the local markets are not or are emission-free enough. So that it is a local green market that then is able to export to other areas, or if there is an industrial demand locally. So in other words, the local supply and demand is the number one in first of all electrical, and if that is sufficiently covered, then hydrogen. So at this phase of the market, all the hydrogen that we see in all the pilots is just a test, is a first step in the long-term route toward emission-free energy.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul. You've been working in this sector and in this region for plenty of years, considerable years, and it was a really great presentation from you, and I think we have a lot to learn from that. And I think this is pretty much the end about your presentation. And if there are further questions, it will be highly appreciated if you can stay and try to address some of them.
Okay, so I'm still there, yeah.
Yes, and it's time for us to invite our next and concluding session, the capital and the funding support contributed by EBRD as well as APICORP. Industry argument, and to unleash the full potential, the capital and funding support from both the public and the private sectors play a critical role, and that leads to our last but not least panel. I'm more than honored to welcome Cristian and Suhail on stage representing EBRD, the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, as well as APICORP, the Arab Petroleum Investment Corporation. In terms of how the panel will progress, we will firstly take the form of a moderated discussion on key issues in the market, followed by audience Q&A, which I attempt to aggregate later on. But first, let's hear from our speakers themselves. So Cristian and Suhail, may you firstly introduce yourself, where are you sitting in, and what the role that EBRD and APICORP are planning to play in the hydrogen space? Who's going to be the first?
I can begin if you want. Well, thank you very much, Molly, for inviting me to this very interesting event. Actually, we learned a lot from the previous speakers and some very well-known faces, I must add. So at the EBRD, my responsibility in the context of our conversation today is to try helping taking the first steps for the bank in financing projects in the broad space of clean hydrogen. I'm using clean on purpose because while our primary focus is going to be clearly on renewable hydrogen, we also keep the door open, if you wish, to other sources of hydrogen, as long as Paul mentioned before, its carbon footprint is extremely low, if not zero. So I think at this moment, the bank, myself and the bank are really looking forward to combine policy dialogue with the governments in creating markets and also creating investment opportunities with our clients. So I think we are very optimistic that the very first projects will come sooner than we would have thought just maybe a couple of years ago.
Thank you, Cristian. And it's your turn, Suhail.
Thank you, Molly. It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you for having me. APICORP, or the Arab Petroleum Investments Corporation, is a multilateral development bank which develops and fosters the energy sectors in the Arab and in the MENA region. We provide financing services through equity financing, project financing, in addition to trade financing, as well as energy and research advisory services. And APICORP is AA rated financial institution by both Moody's and Fitch. I believe that the discussion today on hydrogen as a theme is very timely, as the theme is gaining momentum globally and in the MENA region. Although hydrogen might be, if you want, the holy grail of the energy vectors, yet certain aspects need to be clarified, need to be put in context, especially within this critical energy transition that the world is going through. And I hope that we can touch upon these issues throughout our panel discussion today.
Very well, and let's get straight into our first question, which is a general one for both of the speakers. What is the perception, or how is hydrogen perceived among the decarbonization options for your company? Is hydrogen seen as having a particularly privileged role, or it's just seen as one of many decarbonization options? First up, Cristian.
All right. Well, I think, first of all, you mentioned the key word that is decarbonization, right? So if you look back again, even just a couple of years ago, there was a lot of talking at the political and policy level and also the industrial level about doing the best we can to reduce the carbon footprints of different economic sectors. While now you fast forward to today, 2 years later, and everything is about reaching carbon neutrality. So there's been a massively higher pressure coming from the stakeholders, broadly speaking, in enhancing all possible weapons that we can use in this transition. Now, I believe hydrogen will not be a fit for everything type of weapon, again, if you want to keep using this word, but it's something that it's a relatively precious resource that we should use primarily for those sectors that don't really have other reliable or realistic options to decarbonize. So, for instance, you can, with the complexity of the case, but you can easily decarbonize the power sector with wind and solar. It's a matter of managing the overall system integration. Whereas you still have a huge question mark on how some other industrial sectors, from steel making to, I don't know, chemicals in some segments, and also long distance transportation can reach carbon neutrality. So I believe there will be a concentrated focus primarily on those sectors and those regions where there are no real credible alternatives rather than a generalized use in all economic sectors.
Yes, And for Suhail, APICORP is going to issue around $1 billion on green finance in the next 2 years. How do you perceive the hydrogen business?
Yeah, actually, the $1 billion green bond framework, if you want, falls within the green bond framework that we announced as a result of the ESG policy framework that we are adopting at APICORP. Well, we defined 3 distinct categories that fall within the green bond framework, mainly renewables, pollution and prevention and control, and promoting energy efficiency, especially in new build and retrofitted buildings. Hydrogen, from an investor perspective, from a private investor perspective, we see any emerging technology in terms of risk and reward, if you want. When we look at hydrogen, we see very high risk, especially when it comes to technology risk, and lack of clarity when it comes to reward and what could be the returns on such investments. So for now, we see that hydrogen is a vital tool to reach the net zero goals by 2050. It is the missing link maybe for national governments to be on the track to decarbonization. But I think timing here is of the essence. Maybe hydrogen could be a mature market where private investors can pitch in with financing, but maybe by the end of the decade and not now. And we can touch upon why. First of all, we see high technology risk, especially for green hydrogen when it comes to electrolyzers, blue hydrogen when it comes to CCUS projects. Both of them, there are issues with modularity and with scalability as a technology, as a standalone technology. We see certain policy risks and the regulatory framework risks. We see, as I said, hydrogen now is not a tradable commodity yet, if you want. So it is being utilized or used at first point of destination, and it is not traded as LNG, for example. So until we reach where hydrogen becomes a fully tradable commodity market, we see the rules of supply and demand in play. We see clear pricing signals, whether spot market or long-term indexed prices, for example. We can have some clarity on what reward private investors can expect from such investments, especially that it is a highly intensive capital investments that we are talking about. In addition to that, we have the issue of infrastructure and the need to deploy huge infrastructures, which needs maybe tens of billions of dollars. And all of that cannot happen without, for now, direct governmental support. And we can discuss in what type, what kind of policy tools can be implemented to promote that and activate the hydrogen markets, if you want.
Very well. And when we talk about business models and structures, we talk about long-term prosperity and risk mitigations. When I raised the question, the top 3 criteria for financing a hydrogen project, Cristian, you put offtake contract as the top priority. So,
yes,
with regard to offtake contract, we need to have buyers first. Who do you think the buyers can be, and which application or which sectors could be the early consumer of H2 in your opinion?
Yes, and that's, I believe naturally, and I think my colleague just highlighted the answer already, right? Because what we are seeing these days is that the projects that might become a reality pretty soon are nearly co-located. Demand and supply are in the same place, and not only because of the distance and the transportation from A to B, but it's exactly about the off-take. So we as a bank, we as banks in plural, when we started financing renewable solar and wind like 10, 15 years ago, the primary concern was the security of cash flows, right? So it was about having bankable offtake agreements. And here it's exactly the same. We are exactly at the same situation where we were with solar and wind when we started creating that market. And look at where they are today, right? It's a fantastic success of cooperation globally. Now on hydrogen is the same. So the issue is really about finding the demand. We are so much focused on the supply today, rightly so, but probably we are underestimating that there is someone at the end of the value chain that needs to pay for the kilograms of hydrogen they will receive. And so there is sometimes a bit of misleading perspective that you blend it in a gas pipeline and someone will pay, but that's not the real case. So that's the issue. So we need to start looking at the off-takers in first place. So your question is where you think you will find off-takers more easily, right? So I think the obvious answer is fertilizer companies, refining companies that are already existing users of hydrogen, and very likely in many geographies are already under higher pressure on greening their supply chain. They need to decrease the carbon footprint of their products. And so there is already a market in place sometimes to drive the transition and an investment decision from gray to blue or green. And so that's where I think you will find easily off-takers. Then again, very often there are industrial clusters in some manufacturing valleys, for instance, where you might have coexistence of different industrial users that might need hydrogen for different purposes, but they just don't have the supply. So there you might have a critical mass of off-takers, one close to the others, that justify a larger scale investment. And when you go larger scale, is where you find economy of scale more easily. And so then it also becomes more competitive to take this type of investment decision.
Yes, and a follow-up question to that, because I think offtake is going to be the most frequently touched word in this session. When we talk about offtake contract, it has to be an agreement reached by both the producers and users. And so far, limited financing deals have been closed. How can we possibly identify the suitable offtake for hydrogen? The question goes to Cristian and then to Suhail.
Maybe rephrase the question a little bit to give me a hint on the...
Sorry?
If you can rephrase a little bit the question.
Okay, so it's very simple. How can we possibly identify the suitable offtake contract for hydrogen?
All right. Well, my advice is not to reinvent the wheel and look back at similar offtake contracts and offtake agreements that have worked a lot in other similar contexts. Again, for a financial institution, it's important to have clarity on the legal and commercial relations between the parties and the interfaces between the parties. So again, looking back at renewable electricity, for instance, but also the oil and gas sector, where there have been a lot of, an industry in general, a lot of successful cases where some services have been outsourced to third parties, right? That's a perfect case where often you have very complex dynamics that are regulated by clear commercial contracts. So again, I suppose for me, it's about trying to pick the solutions that have worked in other markets and replicate them here. Because it's a new product, but it's not a new market, if you want. So you can really mimic business models that have worked effectively in other markets.
Right. We've been talking about hydrogen since I think it's the 1970s. However, it's only recently, around a year or two, that the hydrogen business is really taking off. And to Suhail, do you have any add-ons to the question?
I totally agree with Cristian. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from our previous mistakes and try to avoid them when implementing them on hydrogen. But I think going deeper than that, when it comes to offtake agreements and contractual structures for hydrogen, maybe what's missing on a higher level is the laws and regulations, which should cascade from the roadmaps and strategies which the national governments are doing. These should be cascaded down to really detailed laws and regulations that give some sort of fiscal stabilities, for example, in the contract, some sort of risk mitigation, commercial risk mitigation, especially when it comes to standardization, certification issues, which are still missing right now. So the guarantee of origin, for example, there is no international agreement, if you want, if this is really a green molecule of hydrogen or a blue molecule of hydrogen. There are still disagreements. All of that should be taken into consideration somehow in the contracts, in the contractual agreement between the supplier and the consumer. So that's one thing. Second, for the offtake agreements, I think for now, the obvious off-takers are the hard-to-abate industries, and especially the petrochemical and the refining industries, which are already using a gray hydrogen in their activities as a feedstock. So the obvious solution is to start with hydrogen clusters or valleys near these petrochemical and refining industries, if we're talking about the GCC in the MENA. And this could be one step along the way to have some clarity when it comes to how supply and demand is evolving, how are the contracts taking place, what are the price dynamics for the hydrogen market. So yeah, I believe that the regulatory and the policy risk plays a big role here.
In summary, Suhail, what are the key elements will be needed in place before an H2 project is fully financed by APICORP?
Yeah, well, for financing a hydrogen project, it's like a puzzle with so many moving parts, so many pieces that need to come together. If you want to summarize them, we can see 5 key areas that we need to address. First of all, as I said, the technology risk needs to be mitigated. When it comes to green hydrogen, we see a high technology risk with electrolyzers, as Mr. Wael said previously. We have multi-megawatt sized electrolyzers, but with the scale of hydrogen anticipated, we need multi-gigawatt scale electrolyzers, and we do not have the technology yet. So that's one thing. For blue hydrogen, also CCUS, carbon capture and utilization or storage, we have globally now 16 maybe operational small and mid-sized CCUS projects. However, with the scale of blue hydrogen anticipated, you need larger CCUS technologies, which are highly modular, and all of these currently are impacting the costs, where we are not seeing any parity with gray hydrogen yet. So for an investor, you see only 2 choices. Either I enter the market now at very high cost, but I gain market share early on, or I can wait 5-10 years from now. I enter the market for a lower market share, but at a lower cost. So same thing what happened with the solar CSP, if you want, 10 years ago and now. So that's one area, technology. Second area, we see the regulatory and the policy risk, which I touched upon. So you need to cascade these roadmaps and strategies to detailed laws and regulations and take into consideration the certification, the standardization programs. Third major point is to have an established commodity market, tradable commodity market for hydrogen, so that you have clear market dynamics in terms of supply and demand, and to see the clear pricing signals, what's taking place, to measure your reward, basically. The fourth major area is the issue of infrastructure. So no matter how much production you have and supply you have, if you cannot deliver that along the value chain from transmission to distribution to storage, it's useless, basically, only for the nearby off-takers, if you want. So you need huge infrastructure that needs to be put in place to make a full optimized use of that produced hydrogen. And finally, the most important thing is the governmental support. So governments can either activate the markets or kill the markets early on. Governments, they have a wide array of policy tools in their toolkit that they can implement. For example, they can go into equity ownership in pilot projects that will give some assurances to the private investor. They can provide certain tax credits, technology-specific subsidies, for example, if we're talking about electrolyzer technology, CCUS technology, to mitigate the technology risk. They can facilitate access to markets, since the region already has access to the oil and gas market, so it can facilitate that. It can kick off pilot and demonstration projects. And the most important tool that we are seeing being implemented is the carbon pricing to incentivize switching from dirtier, if you want, energy vectors to cleaner energy vectors. So that could put the price of green and blue hydrogen on par with gray hydrogen, the carbon pricing. So I see these 5 main themes: technology, regulation, infrastructure, commodity market, and governmental support.
And it was a great and comprehensive explanation. And to Cristian, based on your past experiences, what are the 2 or 3 key issues or hurdles to implementing large-scale finance, despite we have all the knowledge about key elements? What are the challenges? And does EBRD have any strategy to manage around these risks?
Well, I think specifically on large-scale hydrogen, the issue is, well, I think Suhail already highlighted brilliantly the main pillars that any developer needs to take into account before approaching a financial institution with a project. I think a peculiar characteristic is that very often, especially with large-scale green hydrogen, you might have large renewable electricity plants located in some locations. Then you have the grid to deliver the electron to the electrolyzer that is located somewhere else, where you produce the commodity, if you wish, and then it's transported to the off-taker. And so I think the very first issue is that very seldom we will be able to finance the entire envelope as a single project. So you need, first of all, to try to break down the huge value chain into smaller components that can be more easily financed, not necessarily as standalone projects, but it will be impossible probably for any lender to provide financial support to a very complex and highly integrated project. So first of all, you need to break it down into smaller units and then define the interfaces, as we said earlier on, with the suitable contracts. And so I guess that is one important issue. Number 2 is, again, the sheer size of this type of projects create a number of issues on the financial risk, but also on the technology risk. So for us these days, it's still very difficult to finance something that doesn't have many successful examples somewhere else in the world. So a bank like us takes a lot of market and geographical political risk. So we are the best counterpart, if you wish, to bring this new business model into a new market. But we are not designed to finance the very first project anywhere in the world. So there is still a risk of having very good opportunities in MENA region, for instance, because you have plentiful of natural resources that will make it an ideal location. But there isn't yet the comfort of having seen something like that somewhere else that has been successfully completed. So again, the other challenge, if you want, is to create the first successful examples with commercial agreements in operation in the world, so that the MENA region can replicate the same projects. Again, it's about building confidence on the structures, on the technologies, so that lenders at the end of the day can better understand the projects and their risks and design the suitable mitigating tools around those risks.
And in your opinion, what are the actions that public and private sector in MENA need to take in order to speed up the growth of a green hydrogen economy? What kind of actions?
Well, I can tell you what we are doing. So because we strongly believe hydrogen is an important opportunity and we need to help the countries where we operate, including in North Africa and the Middle East, take this opportunity on board. It's a combination, I think, of different components. First and foremost, we're trying to engage with the governments to create the enabling environment. So very often, as already mentioned, you don't have a regulatory framework that clearly enables this type of new operators to act in the local markets. And so first of all, we need to create a regulatory framework that allows for these projects to take up. Number two is also, nonetheless, despite the huge interest that hydrogen is attracting, there is still a lot of need for capacity building and helping clients structuring good projects. So again, what we are trying to do is to provide support through technical cooperation programs to try to ensure the private sector design good projects, effective projects in different segments of the value chain. And then number three probably is to create the financial incentives that allow the decision maker to say, fine, we go ahead with this investment. We know that we can trust our partners, including the EBRD and the other financial institutions and the government. And so we think it's the right time to move ahead with the investment decision. So it's a combination of creating the markets and creating the competence locally for this type of projects to happen.
Yes, and now as we are zooming in the MENA region, it's quite an export-oriented market and require quite a good amount of capital investment and production, transportation, and the export facilities. Which timeline do you think is foreseen for hydrogen commercialization in MENA? And how do you see the hydrogen and ammonia export market in MENA? The question goes to Suhail.
Yeah, Molly, thank you for the question. Well, for every new technology being deployed and integrated in the energy sector, there are usually three stages that it passes through, which we are seeing now. First of all, you have the first phase, which is scaling up and laying the market foundations. That's what's happening with hydrogen right now. And we expect that this will continue to happen at least till 2025 plus. The second phase that it should pass through is the widespread adoption and the market maturity. We start seeing a market maturity when it comes to hydrogen, and we expect to see that by the end of 2020, maybe early 2030. The third phase, which will be the full implementation of hydrogen as an energy vector in several applications, and we see that happening beyond 2030. So for the MENA region, we see that blue hydrogen, we are seeing the market foundations and scaling up for blue hydrogen for the region. And from now till 2025 maybe, and from 2025 till 2030, it will play a transitional role until we reach, by 2030, the cost of green hydrogen will be competitive enough with blue and gray hydrogen, which can be fully implemented. The reason why I'm stressing on blue hydrogen is that, you know, the region is endowed with vast oil and gas resources with low carbon, low cost, and you have established business models for the NOCs and the IOCs, and blue hydrogen slightly disrupts, if you want, the existing business models for the NOCs and the IOCs, and you incentivize them to adopt blue hydrogen as a clean energy vector rather than antagonize them by telling them you have to disrupt your whole business model and create a new one. So this creates something we call a green paradox, where actually the NOCs and the IOCs will start monetizing their oil and gas assets on a faster pace in fear of having them stranded later on. So this gives a negative feedback loop, if you want, for the whole energy transition journey that we are adopting. So we see blue hydrogen being a transitional energy vector from now till 2030. Beyond 2030, we see green hydrogen being implemented as an energy vector. The natural export markets for the GCC region is the Southeast Asian countries, mainly Japan and Korea, which the GCC will be in very high and fierce competition, if you want, with Australia and Chile to supply the Southeast Asian countries. As for the Europe, which is the other demand sink, North African countries have a high competitive advantage to supply through existing natural gas pipelines. However, the blending of hydrogen with the natural gas pipelines can reach 10 to 15% maximum, or else you have to create new capital-intensive hydrogen pipelines, which are thicker, which have different design metrics, and but GCC can export to the Southeast Asian countries through ammonia ships, whether green or blue ammonia. North Africa can supply through pipelines. So this is how we see the MENA region emerging as a potential export market for both blue and green hydrogen from now till the end of the decade at least.
Can I rephrase it in this way? So you think the green hydrogen will be the end game, but for the near term, let's say until 2030, blue hydrogen will be prioritized by the government.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And now we come to our final question, which is a bit of a tricky question. I want to have one more ask to both of the panelists. If you have to Suhail first, if you have the chance to ask one question for Cristian, what would that be? And vice versa to Cristian, what would be your question to Suhail? Before we wrap up everything.
Shall I start with my question?
It would be great.
All right, the first question that pops into my mind is which MENA country you see most competitive if you want to finance a blue or green hydrogen project? Which MENA country do you see as most competitive that you might take that step and finance it?
It's a tricky question. I don't want to make any preference. So first of all, as EBRD, we don't cover all the countries in Middle East and North Africa. So we primarily cover North African countries, so the countries that look at the Mediterranean Sea. There is an obvious early mover that we've already heard about earlier today, that is Morocco, right? That has a lot of reasons why in the region where we work again. So I'm not going to talk about the Gulf countries. And so that is a country that has months literally of advantage in comparison with its neighbors, because they started talking and acting on hydrogen before others. But I guess also for us, we hear a lot of positive vibe coming from Egypt. There is a lot of interest, a lot of interesting opportunities being prepared there. So it's going to be a close race to see which one of these two will have the very first successful project. And then, of course, you know better the Gulf countries than me. There are projects that are very well known today, and they are very close to becoming a reality. And maybe my counter question is, because you now mentioned this interesting dynamic with the national oil and gas companies, do you think there will be this sort of legacy effect in the policy decisions taken by these governments, so that to protect, let's say, the current markets, they might have a sort of preference for one of the hydrogen colors, if you want, rather than just making a level play field for all types of hydrogen production?
Yeah, I think the national governments here, the GCC, are all adopting the energy diversification pathway, if you want, with UAE's latest adoption of net zero pathway to 2050. So all the countries are trying to diversify their energy mix. And I think both colors of hydrogen, green and blue, will be adopted within the energy mix, but the timeline might shift with respect to blue than with that of green. Why is that? Because the region is, as previously demonstrated, highly competitive in renewable resources and in oil and gas resources. So why don't take advantage of both and claim higher market share in green and blue hydrogen? So I believe the approach for national governments for now, I mean, in order not to antagonize NOCs and IOCs, adopt a blue hydrogen approach, which will disrupt slightly, I would say, their existing business models, but you can counter that by providing certain types of incentives, tax credits, technology-specific subsidies for CCUS, for example, to promote that change. Until hydrogen picks up, becomes an established commodity market, renewables costs also, and you have maturity when it comes to electrolyzer technology, then naturally it will enter the generation and the energy mix in the region. So I would say, the role of policymakers, they have to see the big picture. They have to try to also, you want to balance supply and demand dynamics. So you don't want to, as you said, to put a laser-like focus on producing and on supply without incentivizing or creating enough demand, or else you will flood the market with low-priced hydrogen, and this will be a disincentive for newcomers to the hydrogen market, and the market will dampen itself. So I believe both spectrums, color spectrums, will be adopted, but with the shift in timing, if you want.
Cristian, are you satisfied with the answer?
I am, very much so. Thank you.
And it's a really great and very interactive session, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Now it comes to the end of today's talk. Although I'd be very much love to have you talk about this forever, the time won't allow. If I may, I would like to take this opportunity thanking all of our great presenters today, and thank you so much to our audience for staying with us until now. Tomorrow, we will be back with our Impact MENA Solar session, and it would be great if you can come back and listen to the greatest ideas from the Egypt Ministry, Iraqi Ministry, as well as Egypt Ministry, as well as Jordan Ministry. And Mr. Suhail, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Moali.
It's really nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone.